The morning light crept softly through the thin curtains of the small countryside house, painting golden streaks across the wooden floor. James stood by the window, watching the mist curl over the green fields. The once powerful CEO who had commanded entire boardrooms now found himself counting the ripening vegetables behind the house. His hands, once used to signing contracts, were now rough and brown from days of tilling soil. Behind him, the faint clatter of pots and the gentle hum of a song filled the air. Tu Diep, with her hair tied in a simple bun, was stirring a pot of porridge over the small stove. The scent of rice and ginger drifted warmly through the air. When she turned to look at him, her smile was the same one that had carried him through the darkest nights, soft, unspoken, and strong. "Breakfast is ready," she said gently, placing two bowls on the table. James nodded, forcing a smile, but deep inside, he carried a quiet ache. He still remembered the days when he could buy her the world, roses, jewels, and dinners in candlelit restaurants. Now, he could barely afford a bag of rice. Tu Diep seemed to notice his silence. She reached across the table, her hand covering his. "James," she said softly, her eyes filled with calm certainty, "we don't need roses. We just need us." Those words hit deeper than any promise he had ever heard. He wanted to believe her, to believe that love could exist even in the absence of luxury. Outside, the wind brushed gently against the banana leaves, and the morning sun grew brighter. James looked at her again, at the way her eyes sparkled in the light, at the way her fingers held his hand with warmth and trust. For a brief moment, the weight of the world felt lighter. He realized that true love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about surviving the small, imperfect days together. The days when all you had was each other, and somehow, that was enough. That morning, as they shared the simple meal in their tiny home, James felt a quiet peace settle inside him. It wasn't the life he had planned, but maybe, just maybe, it was the life that truly mattered. The days grew longer, and the quiet peace they had built was soon tested by reality. It started with a heavy rain that refused to stop. The fields behind their small house flooded, washing away the vegetables James and Tu Diep had spent months tending. Their source of income vanished overnight. James stood outside under the downpour, his clothes drenched, staring blankly at the murky water swallowing his hard work. He didn't say a word, but inside, his heart sank deeper. Then the muddy ground beneath his feet, everything he tried seemed to crumble. Once again, he felt powerless, a failure. Tu Diep came out with an umbrella, her hair already soaked by the rain. She walked toward him, her bare feet splashing through the puddles. Without saying a word, she wrapped her arms around him from behind. Her embrace was small, fragile, but it carried warmth strong enough to pierce through the storm. "James," she whispered against his back, "you don't have to fix everything right now. We'll find a way, like we always do." He turned to face her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I promised you a better life. I can't even keep this house dry." Tu Diep smiled softly. "You've already given me more than I ever dreamed of, a home, a heart, and a reason to keep going. Isn't that enough?" Her words broke him. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. The rain continued to fall, but for a moment, they stood there quietly, two souls clinging to each other against the world's chaos. That night, the roof leaked, the lights flickered, and the sound of thunder rolled across the sky. Yet, as they sat close under a single blanket, Tu Diep leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Even storms can't wash away what's real." James looked at her and finally smiled. The storm outside no longer frightened him, because in her eyes, he found the calm he'd been searching for all along. The morning after the storm was eerily quiet. The air still smelled of wet earth, and the once green garden now lay flat beneath the weight of the floodwater. The wooden fence had collapsed, and the tools James had carefully stored were scattered across the yard. Yet, amid all that destruction, there was a small spark of life, a few sprigs of mint still standing tall near the kitchen window. James knelt down, running his fingers over the tiny green leaves. Even they didn't give up. He murmured softly. Tu Diep, standing nearby, smiled faintly. "Then neither will we." Those words became their quiet promise. They spent the next days working from dawn till dusk, clearing mud, repairing the roof, and rebuilding the fence with salvaged wood. Nee, their little girl, followed them around, laughing as she carried small twigs, pretending to help. Her innocent voice filled the silence, turning despair into something lighter, something almost hopeful. There were moments when James's muscles ached so badly he thought he couldn't move another brick. But each time he looked at Tu Diep, her hands covered in soil, her hair messy from the wind, yet her eyes steady and full of courage, he found the strength to continue. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and rose, they finally finished repairing the fence. James stood back, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's not perfect," he said with a tired smile, "but it's ours." Tu Diep handed him a glass of water and teased, "You sound like you're talking about our life." He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that seemed to echo through the quiet fields. "Maybe I am." They sat side by side on the porch, watching the last light of day fade. The world around them was still damaged, but inside their small home, something beautiful had survived: love, quiet and unshakable. And when Nee came running out, holding a wildflower she had picked from the yard and shouting, "Mama, Papa, look," James and Tu Diep looked at each other and smiled. The flower was small, fragile, and imperfect, yet it was enough to remind them that life always finds a way to bloom again. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to its gentle rhythm. The fields began to turn green again, the air smelled of new beginnings, and laughter often drifted out from the small house on the hill. Yet beneath the calm surface, James and Tu Diep still carried silent worries. The company had not fully recovered, and the debts from the storm weighed heavily on James's shoulders. One night, as the rain began to fall softly once more, James sat by the window, staring at the faint glow of streetlights in the distance. His hands were clasped tightly together, his mind restless with fear of losing everything again. Tu Diep came quietly, wrapping a shawl around his shoulders. She didn't speak, she just sat beside him, their hands finding each other naturally, as if drawn by an invisible thread. "Do you ever wish things were easier?" James finally whispered, his voice breaking the silence. Tu Diep smiled faintly. "If things were easier, maybe we wouldn't have learned how strong we are." Her words settled into his heart like a soft echo. He looked at her, at the woman who had stood by him through every loss, every fear, every storm. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her clothes were simple, but her eyes shone with a quiet kind of beauty, the beauty of faith, endurance, and unconditional love. The rain grew heavier, but instead of feeling trapped, James felt comforted. The soft rhythm against the roof reminded him that even storms could sound like music when shared with someone who truly cared. Suddenly, Nee appeared at the door, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Papa, Mama, can I sleep with you tonight?" James lifted her into his arms, holding her close. Tu Diep smiled as the little girl curled up between them. For a moment, everything, the rain, the fear, the past, faded away, leaving only warmth. James kissed Tu Diep's forehead. "You were right," he whispered. "Love isn't about roses or fancy words. It's about this, staying, holding on, and choosing each other every day." Tu Diep rested her head against his shoulder. "Then let's keep choosing," she said softly. And as the storm outside roared and then slowly quieted, the three of them lay together, safe, warm, and whole. Their love, tested and scarred, had not only survived but grown deeper, becoming something unbreakable. It wasn't a miracle. It was simply love, steady, human, and real. Morning light poured through the thin curtains, painting soft gold across the room. The world outside was calm. Birds sang. The smell of wet soil still lingered after the night's rain, and the hum of life slowly began again. Inside, James woke to see Tu Diep asleep beside him, her hands still holding his. Little Nee lay nestled between them, breathing peacefully. It was such a simple sight, yet to James, it was everything. He thought about the years behind them, the failures, the nights of doubt, the long days when giving up had seemed easier. He had faced losses he never thought he could endure, But somehow, every time he had stumbled, it was Tu Diep's quiet strength that helped him stand again. She never demanded grand promises or roses. Instead, she offered something far greater: her faith, her patience, her gentle presence through every storm. Tu Diep stirred, her eyes opening slowly. "You're awake," she murmured with a sleepy smile. James nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am." She laughed softly. "Lucky? We still have bills to pay, a leaky roof, and a dozen things unfinished." "Yes," he said, "but I have you." "And her." He looked at me. "And that's more than enough." Tu Diep leaned closer, her voice a whisper. "Then let's keep going, one small step, one day at a time." James took her hand and kissed it. Always, outside, the sun rose higher, touching the fields with golden light. The world seemed to whisper quietly around them, not of riches or fame, but of peace, of simple love that refused to fade. Because true love, James finally understood, doesn't need roses or perfection. It just needs the hearts willing to stay when life turns rough, to choose kindness over anger, and to believe, even when everything feels uncertain. In the silence of that morning, James smiled. The world could keep its grand gestures. He had found something far more precious, a love that endured, quietly but endlessly, and that, he knew, was the truest happiness of all. In a world that often glorifies grand gestures, luxury, and perfection, the love between James and Tu Diep teaches a lesson far deeper: that true love is not built on roses or expensive gifts, but on presence, patience, and perseverance. Their journey was not one of fairy tale ease. It was carved from the struggles of daily life, the tears shed in silence, and the courage to hold on when everything seemed to fall apart. James once believed success meant power and wealth, but when he lost almost everything, his business, his confidence, his peace, it was Tu Diep who stood by him. She did not demand explanations or blame him for the misfortunes that came. Instead, she became his quiet shelter, her smile after a long, hard day, her simple meals cooked with care, and her faith in him even when he doubted himself. Those were the things that saved him. It was through her that he learned the most profound truth: love is not proven through words or wealth, but through the willingness to stay and nurture when life gets hard. Tu Diep, too, had her own struggles: the exhaustion of caring for her family, the fear of losing the man she loved to failure, the constant balancing between dreams and responsibilities. Yet through it all, she never stopped believing in kindness. Her love was not loud or dramatic. It was gentle, like the steady rhythm of rain, quiet, consistent, and full of life. She showed that the greatest strength lies not in shouting promises, but in simply choosing to love again, every morning, despite yesterday's pain. Their story reminds us that love's beauty lies in the ordinary moments: sharing breakfast before sunrise, holding hands after an argument, laughing over small things that only they understand. It is in those moments that love becomes real, not in perfection, but in persistence. The greatest lesson James and Tu Diep offer is this: when you love someone, you don't need to promise forever. You just need to show up every day and choose them again. Love is not about avoiding hardship, but about walking through it together. And when the storms finally pass, and the world grows quiet again, what remains is not the memory of pain or loss, but the warmth of two hearts that refuse to give up on each other. That is the quiet power of enduring love, a love that doesn't fade, because it was never built on perfection, but on faith, forgiveness, and the simple miracle of staying.